The roar of engines rolled like distant thunder across the cracked asphalt of the old gas station at the edge of town. Dust hung in the warm evening air as a line of motorcycles stood parked in a crooked half-moon, chrome glinting under the dying sun. Leather vests, patched and worn, moved slowly as their owners laughed, drank coffee from paper cups, and argued about routes and weather. To most people passing by, the scene looked intimidating: big men, heavy boots, scarred knuckles, and bikes that looked like they'd chewed up miles and spat them out. It was the kind of place parents told their kids not to stare at. None of them noticed the little girl at first. She came running out of nowhere, barefoot, her dress dirty and torn at the hem. Her hair stuck to her face with sweat and tears. She tripped once, caught herself, and kept running straight toward the bikers as if they were the only solid thing left in her world. When she reached them, she grabbed the leg of the nearest man and clung to it with surprising strength. "They're beating my mama," she sobbed, the words tumbling over each other. "Please. They're hurting her." The laughter died instantly. Every biker froze, cups lowering, cigarettes burning forgotten between fingers. The man she'd grabbed, huge, with a gray beard and arms like carved stone, looked down at her, his face softening in a way that almost hurt to see. He knelt despite the creak in his knees. "Easy, sweetheart," he said, his voice low and steady. "Who's hurting your mama?" She pointed back down the road, toward a cluster of rundown apartments half hidden by trees and rusted fencing. "At home," she cried. "They said don't tell, but they're hitting her. Please." Another biker was already moving. His name was Mason, though most people just called him Bear. He was the club's road captain, the one who decided where they went and how fast. He didn't ask questions. He just nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Keys," he said. In seconds, engines roared back to life. One biker scooped the girl up gently, settling her on his bike with his jacket wrapped around her shoulders. Mason swung onto his own motorcycle and shot a glance around. "No sirens," he said. "Not yet." They rode hard and fast, the bikes weaving through streets most of them hadn't driven in years. The girl clutched the biker's waist, her sobs muffled by the rumble of the engine. She pointed when they got close, her small finger shaking. "That one," she whispered. "Please hurry." They didn't park politely. The bikes skidded to a stop in front of the apartment building, engines snarling like angry animals. Doors slammed open on balconies above as neighbors peeked out, startled by the noise. From inside one of the ground floor units came the unmistakable sound of shouting, and a woman crying out in pain. That was enough. Mason kicked the door once. The cheap wood splintered, the lock snapping like a twig. Inside, the air was thick with fear and the sour smell of alcohol. Two men stood over a woman curled on the floor, her face already swelling, her arms raised uselessly to shield herself. She looked up in terror, then confusion, then something like disbelief as the bikers filled the doorway. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then one of the men laughed nervously. "Hey, this ain't..." He never finished the sentence. The bikers moved with terrifying efficiency. No wild swinging, no chaos, just firm, controlled force. Hands grabbed collars, twisted arms behind backs, shoved bodies into walls. A fist slammed into a stomach hard enough to knock the wind out of it. Another biker pinned a man to the floor with a knee and leaned in close enough for their foreheads to almost touch. "You ever touch her again," he said quietly, "and you won't have hands left to do it." The girl's mother was lifted gently, wrapped in a jacket, and guided to the couch. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. One biker crouched in front of her, his voice soft. "You're safe now," he said. "You hear me, safe." Outside, someone had already called the police. This time, sirens were welcome. The men were still pinned when the officers arrived, wide-eyed at the sight before them. A group of bikers standing calmly in a wrecked living room, a woman sobbing into a leather sleeve, a little girl clutching a teddy bear one of the bikers had pulled from his saddlebag. Statements were taken. Neighbors spoke up, some shakily, some with relief spilling out of them like a confession. This wasn't the first time screams had come from that apartment. It was just the first time someone had answered them. The bikers didn't resist. They didn't need to. When it was over, the woman and her daughter were escorted out, blankets around their shoulders. The girl looked back at the bikers, her eyes huge. "Thank you," she said, her voice small but fierce. "All of you." Mason tipped his head. "Anytime, kid." They thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Weeks later, a letter arrived at the clubhouse. No return address, just careful handwriting. Inside was a photo of the little girl and her mother standing in front of a small house, both smiling. The woman's face was healed, though the memory lingered in her eyes. The letter said they had moved far. She had found work, real work, and her daughter was in school. At the bottom, written in crayon, was a simple message: I want to be brave like you. The letter was passed around in silence. Time moved on, as it always does. Seasons changed. Rides were taken. Miles were logged. The story faded into one of those moments bikers talked about late at night, when the fire burned low and the world felt smaller and more honest. Until one afternoon, years later, when a young woman walked into the clubhouse. She stood awkwardly in the doorway, looking at the patches, the bikes, the men who went quiet when they saw her. She was tall now, confident in a way that spoke of hard-earned strength. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on Mason. She smiled. You probably don't remember me, she said. But you saved my mom. The room held its breath. She told them about school, about growing up, about how that night had shaped everything that came after. How she'd learned that help could come from unexpected places. How she'd learned that strength didn't always look the way people expected it to. My mom passed last year, she said softly. But she never stopped talking about you. About what you did. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I'm opening a shelter, she said. For women and kids. I wanted you to have this. It was an invitation. A small ceremony. A thank you no plaque could ever really capture. Mason cleared his throat, suddenly uncomfortable with the tightness there. You didn't owe us anything, he said. She shook her head. I know. That's why I came. As she left, the clubhouse felt different. Quieter. Fuller. Later that night, the bikers rode out together, engines humming under the stars. They passed the old gas station where it had all started. Mason slowed, just for a moment, and glanced at the empty stretch of road. Somewhere out there, a little girl had once run crying toward a group of men everyone else feared. And because she did, a life was changed. Maybe several. The engines roared on into the dark, carrying with them a truth most people never see. Sometimes the loudest, roughest-looking guardians are the ones who show up when it matters most.